Hello and welcome to another episode of Isn't That Something? I'm Ralph Crewe, and today I'll be exploring a top 10 list. What is the category of the list, you ask? Good question. It's Number 10, Homeostasis. I love homeostasis. I'm doing it like all the time. I'm keeping my internal biological systems in a more or less steady state of physical and chemical conditions, which allows my cells to continue to function normally. Sometimes I sit back and think about all the miraculous microscopic molecular mechanisms going on in my body and the macro scale hormonal and neurological controls that regulate them, and then think, isn't that something? Number 9. Chimney Swifts. These frenetic flying cigars are ubiquitous in the summer skies here in eastern North America. Their bat-like chatter pairs intuitively with their mid-air insect massacres. Besides other swift species, chimney swifts are more closely related to hummingbirds than they are to any other birds. The swifts and hummingbirds form the order Apodiformes, which literally translates to footless. While both hummingbirds and swifts do technically have feet, they're pretty reduced, especially in the swifts. You probably see swifts flying around all the time, but you almost never get a close look because they essentially never land. Chimney swifts cannot walk or even land on flat surfaces. They only cling to vertical surfaces like the interior of a chimney. Even then, they really only do that to nest. Everything else is done on the wing. In fact, some ornithologists posit that chimney swifts migrate to South America during Northern Hemisphere winter and spend their time living at about 10,000 feet. They sleep, eat, and everything else without touching the ground. Isn't that something? Number 8. Humid air is less dense than dry air. When it's humid, it feels like the air is thick and heavy, but that's just because it limits the evaporative cooling effects of our sweat glands. Aviators, baseball players, and atmosphere nerds can all attest to the effect of humidity on the density of the air. It makes sense when we consider what air is made of. Most of the air, about 80%, is molecular nitrogen, or N2. One nitrogen atom has an atomic weight of about 14 atomic mass units, so each molecule in the air weighs 28. The bulk of the remaining fraction of the air is O2, which is even heavier at 32 atomic mass units. Water, on the other hand, is H2O and has a weight of merely 18. Given the so-called ideal gas law, PUVNERT, for air at the same pressure and temperature, humid air must be less dense. Isn't that something? Number 7. Nature is a liar sometimes. Check out these bees. They're not bees, they're hoverflies. They resemble bees, so you're less likely to f with them. But they are members of Diptera, the insect order containing true flies, not Hymenoptera, the order containing bees, wasps, and ants. When harmless, or at least nearly harmless life forms evolve to resemble highly dangerous life forms, it is known as Batesian mimicry. In contrast to Batesian mimics, aggressive mimics are species that use mimicry in a predatory way. Take the enchanting firefly genus, Photurus, the so-called femme fatale fireflies. By the way, the state insect of Pennsylvania is one of these, Photurus pennsylvanica. Photurus females have learned to mimic the blinking come-hither patterns of the females of the smaller Photinus genus. When Photinus males come a-blinking on over to try to mate, bam, eaten. Not only that, but Photinus fireflies have a distasteful compound in them that makes them unappealing to predators. When the femme fatale consumes her victim, she also absorbs their powers, acquiring the distasteful compound in her own cuticle. Isn't that something? Number 6. The dry mass of trees comes mainly from the air. The bulk of a tree doesn't come from the ground. If it did, a big hole would develop around the tree as it removed mass from the surrounding soil. So where does the tree stuff come from? The air. Photosynthesis uses the energy in sunlight to fix carbon from the air and turn it into all sorts of tree stuff like cellulose, sugar, lignin, and the like. Atmospheric carbon dioxide is the source of carbon for all plants, and since they form the first trophic level of the food web that we also live in, we get most of our dry mass from the air as well. So, when you think about it, we're just a super complex arrangement of mostly air and water with a few minerals sprinkled in for flavor.
Today's episode of Isn't That Something is brought to you by dropping food into water. Are you tired of food that is at rest and dry? Try dropping it into water. You can drop anything into water if you just believe. Green apples? Dropped. Tomatoes? Dropped. Red peppers? Dropped. 2 cucumbers? No problem. An onion? You guessed it, dropped into water. An orange? Watch out, that one was dynamic. And now, back to the list.
Number 5. There's a gigantic ball of iron, nearly the size of the moon, directly below you. The Earth's inner core is solid due to the crushing weight of the planet all around it. This ball of iron is also really hot, physically hot. Now, I don't mean it's seductive, although I am really attracted to the center of the Earth.
Oh.
The solid inner core is similar in temperature to the surface of the sun. This solid iron ball is surrounded by a thick liquid iron outer core. Currents of molten iron flowing in this outer core are thought to generate the Earth's magnetic field, protecting us from the sun's dangerous radiation. Unfortunately, the core is so deep in the Earth that no technology exists which would allow us to get into the core. Too bad, Dan Westerland. Isn't that something? Number 4. Every time you shuffle an ordinary deck of cards well enough, you essentially have a 100% chance that the resulting order of cards has never been present in any deck of cards in the history of the universe. There are 52 factorial possible arrangements that a deck of cards can be in, just over 80 unvigintillion. Imagine counting to 1 unvigintillion. Now do it 80 times. If you could write out a quadrillion possible combinations on a single atom, it would still take more atoms than contained in the entire Earth to finish the list once. Isn't that something? Number 3, stifle is an anagram of itself. Number 2, each of your eyes has a blind spot. All vertebrate eyes have their supporting vascular tissue on top of the retina. Those blood vessels have to go right through the retina to connect to the rest of your circulatory system. Interestingly, cephalopods have their supporting tissue on the other side of their retinas, so they don't have a blind spot like us. Now at this point you might ask yourself, Self, I don't see a big hole in the field of view of each of my eyes. What's up with that? Good question. You don't usually see your blind spot because your fancy brain fills it in with what it assumes would be there. Information from your other eye or information about the light incoming in the border region of the blind spot can help your brain fill in this dead spot. You can find your blind spot, however. Cover one eye and then focus on the X in this image. Slowly move back and forth from the screen until you notice the dot disappear. That is your blind spot, and it's been there the whole time. If this doesn't work, verify that you are not a cephalopod and that you are doing it right. Isn't that something? Number 1, dogs. This is my dog, Ellie. She's a golden doodle, and it's just awesome. I mean, look at this, and this, and this. Dogs are thought to have domesticated themselves, at least in the sense that they actively forged relationships with humans tens of thousands of years ago. Domestic dogs have the science name Canis familiaris. The genus Canis also includes wolves, coyotes, and jackals. Interestingly, foxes are not within the genus Canis, but rather belong to vulpes. Isn't that something? Well, there you have it, the top 10. Keep in mind that it changes all the time. So if you'd like updates on what makes the list in the future present, or if you have something that you think should be on the list, let me know in the comments. Did you figure out the unifying theme in today's top 10 list? I thought it was pretty clear, but if you missed it, I'll tell you, it was... Isn't That Something? Isn't That Something was written, recorded, and edited by me, Ralph Crewe. Original music by Kyle Simpson. If you liked this video, please subscribe, obliterate the bell, and loop a playlist of my videos in the background of your browser 24/7. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing to my Patreon, link in the description. Thanks for watching, and insert tagline here. The genus Canis, I said Canis, I'm gonna stick with that, because it doesn't have anus in it.